The engine block of my 1978 Ford Bronco ticked as it cooled, the only sound competing with the relentless mid-morning sun beating down on the high desert. I sat behind the wheel, watching a bead of condensation roll down a can of lukewarm black coffee on the dashboard. Through the windshield, coated in a fine layer of red dust from 3 state lines away, I saw her marching toward me. She looked like a slash of artificial sky against the rugged brown landscape. Dressed in a sharp, light blue suit that probably cost more than the transmission beneath my feet. Her heels struck the asphalt with the rhythm of a judge's gavel, sharp and unforgiving. She did not look at me. She looked at the truck as if it were an infectious disease that had somehow driven itself into her sterile operating room. She stopped at the front bumper, pulled a gold-accented Mont Blanc pen from her pocket, and wrapped it hard against the hood. The metallic clack, clack, clack echoed in the silence of the canyon. "Move this rusted trash before I have it incinerated for pollution," she said, her voice projecting with the practiced clarity of someone who has never been told no. "You look like you sleep in it, but I won't let you turn my driveway into a landfill." She did not wait for a response. She turned her back on me immediately, lifting a manicured hand to signal a heavy-duty tow truck idling 50 yards back, its yellow lights spinning lazily. To her, I was not a person. I was debris. I was an aesthetic violation in a zip code that legislated against imperfections. She believed she was taking out the trash, clearing the entryway for the stream of Porsches and Range Rovers currently backed up behind my tailgate. She had absolutely no idea that she had just declared war on the legal owner of the ground beneath her Italian leather heels. I opened the door. The hinge groaned, a long, rusty complaint that made the woman in the light blue suit flinch. I stepped out, my boots hitting the pavement with a heavy thud. They were caked in red clay and dried mud, a stark contrast to the pristine blacktop of the Homeowner Association's private drive. I did not introduce myself. I did not apologize. I reached into the truck bed and pulled out a tripod and a device that looked like a pair of binoculars, but was actually a military-grade laser rangefinder. I set the tripod down on the center line of the road, leveled it, and peered through the lens. The woman spun around, her face twisting into a mask of incredulity. "I did not give you permission to set up camp," she spat. "This is private property. I am Corinna Draxler, president of the Obsidian Ridge Board, and you are trespassing." I ignored her. I sighted the laser at the cornerstone of the massive marble gatehouse to my left. The device beeped. I noted the numbers in a leather-bound field notebook, the paper worn soft from years of use. Then I swung the laser to the right, targeting the decorative fountain that was currently spraying recycled water into the dry air. Another beep. Another note. "Are you deaf?" Corinna stepped closer, invading my personal space with the scent of expensive perfume and aggression. "I said, move this truck. You are blocking the only access road to 200 luxury estates. I have the sheriff on speed dial, and I will not hesitate to have you arrested for obstruction and trespassing." I finally looked at her. I kept my expression flat, the kind of boredom you cultivate after years of hunting down hidden assets for federal bankruptcy courts. I took a slow sip of my coffee, checking the time on my scratched tactical dive watch. It was exactly 10 a.m. "You might want to hold off on that call," I said, my voice raspy from the dry air. "Unless you want the sheriff to witness a federal eviction." Corinna laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound, Eviction? You are delusional. You look like a drifter who took a wrong turn at the landfill. She reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out a pad of bright orange stickers, and slapped one hard onto the driver's side window of my truck. That is a $5,000 fine for a vehicle causing visual distress to the community. You have 5 minutes to pay it and leave, or I seize the vehicle. I looked at the sticker. It was aggressive, neon, and impossible to peel off without a razor blade. It was a power move designed to humiliate. I did not peel it off. I simply leaned against the truck door right next to the sticker and crossed my arms. While Corinna is busy calling her lawyers to deal with a man she thinks is homeless, I am curious where you are watching this craziness from. Drop your country or flag below. Let's see how far this story travels. 5 minutes, she repeated, checking a diamond-encrusted watch. Corinna, I said, reading the name off the embroidered badge on her lapel. You have a structural problem. You see, I didn't inherit this land from a sweet grandmother who left me a cottage. I recovered this asset. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. What are you babbling about? The Sterling Mining Corporation, I said. Does the name ring a bell? Or maybe the Apex Development Group? Her eyes flickered. It was a micro-expression, gone in an instant, but I caught it. She knew the names. Everyone in the high-stakes real estate game knew Apex. They were the architects of a massive scheme in the late 90s, a house of cards that collapsed and wiped out thousands of investors. They had hidden assets all over the Southwest. Shell companies, land deeds buried under layers of corporate obfuscation. I had spent the last 5 years of my life peeling back those layers, not for revenge, but for restitution. The court ruling had come down 3 days ago. The judgment awarded the creditors the remaining physical assets of Sterling Mining. Ancient history, Corinna scoffed, recovering her composure. This land was developed by Obsidian Partners 10 years ago. We have a clear title. You have a title for the houses, I corrected her. You have a title for the clubhouse. You have a title for the golf course. But you were sloppy, Corinna. Or rather, your developers were. They bought the parcels for the homes, but they didn't buy the mineral rights or the surface access rights for the transition zones. I picked up the orange violation sticker, picked at the corner with my thumbnail, and ripped a piece of it off. They assumed the access roads were public easements. They assumed wrong. This asphalt, this gate, the ground you are standing on, it is legally classified as Unit 49B, a private industrial access road established in 1982. It was never transferred. It was retained by the original holding company as a tax write-off, and as of 72 hours ago, that holding company belongs to me. This is nonsense, Corinna spat, though her hand drifted nervously toward her phone. You are lying. We have been maintaining this road for a decade. That is called trespassing, I said calmly, and unauthorized improvement of private property. But I am a reasonable man. I don't want to dig up the asphalt yet. However, I have conducted a preliminary structural assessment. I tapped the notebook. This road was graded for heavy haulers, Corinna. But the sub-base, it has degraded. According to my calculations, this road is currently unsafe for public transit. I walked to the bed of my truck. The tow truck driver was watching us, confused, his hand hovering over the lever to lower his boom. I ignored him and pulled out a heavy steel survey stake and a 4-pound sledgehammer. I walked to the center line of the road, positioned the stake, and swung the hammer. Clang. The sound of steel driving through asphalt rang out like a gunshot. Clang, clang. I drove it deep into the road she claimed to own. "What do you think you are doing?" Corinna shrieked, her voice cracking. "You cannot damage this road. It is the only way in or out. We have doctors, lawyers, CEOs living here." "Then they should have bought a helicopter," I said, leaning on the handle of the hammer. "Because as the property owner, I have a liability issue. If one of those Range Rovers hits a pothole and snaps an axle, you would sue me. I am mitigating my risk. The road is closed." Corinna's face turned a shade of red that clashed violently with her light blue suit. She jabbed a finger at the tow truck driver. "Hook him now! Drag this piece of junk out of here!" The driver hesitated. He looked at my truck, then at the stake, then at Corinna. "Ma'am, if that is a property dispute, I can't—" "Do it!" she screamed, "or I will terminate your contract with the association." The driver sighed, shifted his truck into gear, and began to back up toward my bumper. Corinna smirked at me. "Checkmate, you dirty grifter. You think you can waltz in here and extort us? I have dealt with con artists before." I didn't move to stop the tow truck. I simply reached into the passenger seat and pulled out a thick document tube sealed with red wax. I cracked the seal and unrolled a large, stiff sheet of paper on the hood of my truck, weighting the corners down with a wrench and the laser rangefinder. "Driver!" I called out, my voice cutting through the mechanical whine of the hydraulic lift. "I am required to inform you that you are about to attach your vehicle to federal evidence involved in an active bankruptcy liquidation." The driver slammed on his brakes. He looked out the window. "Say what?" "This truck contains sensitive geological surveys and court-mandated asset logs," I said, tapping the document. "If you move it without a federal warrant, you are tampering with evidence. That is a felony, son, not a misdemeanor. A felony." The driver looked at Corinna, then back at me. He put his truck in park and threw his hands up. "I'm out, lady. I'm not getting in the middle of a federal case." He put his truck in drive and peeled away, leaving Corinna standing alone in the exhaust fumes. She pulled her phone out, her fingers trembling with rage. "I am calling the sheriff. You are going to jail. You are going to prison. I will take everything you own." "You can try," I said. "But tell Sheriff Prescott to bring a surveyor, and tell him to hurry." While she screamed into her phone, dialing 911, I went back to my measurements. The line of cars behind the gate was growing. A man in a convertible Porsche honked his horn long and hard. I waved at him, pointed to the survey stake, and went back to work. I wasn't just stalling. I was building a case. Every minute Corinna prevented me from securing my property was another count of interference. Every car that drove over my land was another count of trespass. 10 minutes later, the sirens wailed. 2 cruisers from the county sheriff's department skidded to a halt on the highway shoulder. Sheriff Prescott emerged from the lead car. He was a big man wearing a hat that was slightly too large for his head and a belt that was struggling to contain his midsection. He walked with a swagger that suggested he was used to solving problems by being the biggest object in the room. "Corinna," Prescott said, touching the brim of his hat. "What is the trouble? Got a vagrant refusing to move?" "He has blocked the road, Sheriff." Corinna pointed a shaking finger at me. "He drove a metal spike into the pavement. He threatened me, and he is holding the entire community hostage. Arrest him immediately." Prescott turned to me, his hand resting casually on the grip of his sidearm. "All right, son. Fun is over. Pack up your circus and get this truck moving, or you are riding in the back of mine." I didn't flinch. I had stared down federal prosecutors and cartel accountants. A small-town sheriff on an HOA payroll didn't elevate my heart rate. "Sheriff," I said, keeping my hands visible, "I am securing a hazardous roadway on my private property. If you force me to open it, you are accepting full liability for any accidents or injuries that occur on this compromised infrastructure." Prescott blinked. "Private property? This is the main road into Obsidian Ridge. It is public access." "Incorrect," I said. I pointed to the thick blue line running beneath our feet on the map I had spread out. "Unit 49B, mining easement retained by Sterling Corporation. Never subdivided, never dedicated to the county, never transferred to the HOA." I placed a second document next to it. "And this is the federal court order dated 3 days ago, transferring all assets of Sterling Mining to the creditor trust, of which I am Samuel, thus the sole trustee and beneficiary." Prescott squinted at the court order. He saw the seal of the United States District Court. He saw the judge's signature. He saw the asset list. He looked up at me, and the swagger evaporated, replaced by the cautious look of a man realizing he might be walking into a minefield. "This looks official," Prescott muttered. "It is official," I said. "This road is mine. The ground under that gatehouse, mine. The land under that fountain, mine. And right now, I have declared it unsafe for vehicular traffic." "This is nonsense," Corinna shouted, pushing past the sheriff to look at the map. "It is a forgery. He printed it at a copy shop. Look at him, Sheriff. Does he look like he owns $1 million road? He looks like a mechanic." "Appearances can be deceiving, Corinna," I said. "For example, you look like a successful property manager, but you are actually trespassing on a federal asset." Prescott looked at Corinna. "Ms. Draxler, if this court order is real, my hands are tied. This is a civil matter. I can't enforce traffic laws on a private mining road." "You work for us!" Corinna hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "The association donated $10,000 to your re-election fund last month. Do your job." Prescott stiffened. He knew she was right about the money, but he also knew that federal court orders were not something to be trifled with. "I can't arrest a man for standing on his own land. Corinna, you need a lawyer, not a cop." "I have lawyers," she screamed. "I have a team of them." "Then call them on," I said. "But while you are doing that, let's talk about the toll." "Toll?" Corinna stopped screaming, her eyes narrowed. "What toll?" "Well," I said, leaning back against the fender, "since you are so insistent on using my private road, despite the safety warnings, I suppose I could issue a temporary usage permit. But given the wear and tear on the infrastructure and the administrative costs," I looked at my watch, "the rate is $500 per vehicle. One way." "You are insane," she said. "I will not let anyone pay you a dime." "Suit yourself," I shrugged. "Then nobody moves." Behind us, the line of cars had grown to nearly 20 vehicles. The man in the Porsche had gotten out and was walking toward us, looking furious. He was wearing white linen pants and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. "Corinna, what is going on?" he demanded. "I have a tea time in 20 minutes. Get this junk out of the way." "Mr. Henderson," Corinna said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "this man is a criminal. He is trying to extort us. Just wait a few minutes. The police will remove him." "The police aren't removing anyone, Mr. Henderson," I said, "because I own the road. And right now, the toll is $500. Cash. Mr. Henderson looked at me, then at the blocked gate, then at his watch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip thick with bills. He peeled off 500 and threw them on the ground at my feet. There. Open the gate. Corinna gasped. Mr. Henderson, no! You are validating his claim. I don't care about his claim, Corinna, Henderson snapped. I care about my tea time. I bent down, picked up the bills, and dusted them off against my jeans. I pulled a small receipt book from my pocket, scribbled road maintenance fee on a page, tore it out, and handed it to him. Thank you for your contribution to environmental restoration, I said. I walked to the steel stake, pulled it out of the ground with a grunt of effort, and waved him through. Henderson ran back to his Porsche, gunned the engine, and sped past Corinna, leaving her open-mouthed in a cloud of dust. Next! I yelled. One by one, the cars moved forward. Some drivers argued, some cursed, but most of them just paid. They were wealthy people who solved problems with money. To them, $500 was an annoyance, not a barrier. Within 30 minutes, I had a stack of cash in my pocket thick enough to choke a horse. Corinna stood by the gatehouse, frantically typing on her phone, her face pale with fury. She wasn't just losing face, she was losing control. And for a narcissist like Corinna, that was a fate worse than death. While the traffic thinned out, I decided to escalate the investigation. I reached into the back seat of the Bronco and pulled out a hard-shell case. Inside sat a quadcopter drone equipped with a thermal imaging camera. "What is that?" Corinna demanded, looking up from her phone. "Toy time is over." "Property inspection," I said. I powered up the drone, the rotors whirred to life, kicking up small cyclones of red dust. I sent it skyward. On the controller screen, the landscape of Obsidian Ridge unfolded. It was a beautiful lie. Green lawns in the middle of a desert, sparkling pools, and underneath it all, a web of secrets. I toggled the camera to thermal mode. The screen shifted to shades of blue and orange. And there it was, running directly beneath the center of Unit 49B, glowing bright orange against the cooler ground, was a massive heat signature. "Well, well, well," I muttered. "What do we have here?" I flew the drone lower, tracing the line. It wasn't just the residual heat of the asphalt. It was too consistent, too straight. It was a high-voltage underground power trunk, and right next to it, a cooler blue line, a high-pressure water main, and a thin, pulsing line that could only be commercial-grade fiber optics. "Corinna!" I called out, not taking my eyes off the screen. "Do you know what runs under Unit 49B? She glared at me. "The road base which you are holding hostage." "Below that, Isa," I said. 3 feet down, the main power trunk line, the fiber optic cables, the water main that feeds your fire hydrants." "So?" she snapped. "Utility companies have easements." "The utility company does," I agreed, "for the high-voltage lines. But the secondary distribution grid? The one that steps the power down for your heated driveways and wine cellars? That isn't on the county maps." I landed the drone and walked over to the edge of the road, where a green metal box sat half-hidden by decorative sagebrush. I kicked it with my boot. It rang hollow. I pulled a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters from the truck. "What are you doing?" Corinna asked, her voice rising an octave. I am conducting an audit of unauthorized infrastructure, I said. If that power line is trespassing on my soil, I have the right to remove it. Or at the very least, disconnect it until a proper lease is negotiated. You can't, she yelled. The security system, the gates, the refrigeration at the clubhouse. We have $50,000 of Wagyu beef in the freezer. Then negotiate, I said, dropping the bolt cutters onto the pavement with a loud clang. Right now, in front of your people. A small crowd of residents had gathered near the gatehouse, watching the spectacle. They whispered among themselves, looking from Corinna to me. The invincible armor of the HOA was cracking. They were realizing that their entire lifestyle was hung by a thread that ran through my land. Corinna looked at the bolt cutters, then at the residents. Panic warred with pride in her eyes. I will not negotiate with a terrorist, she whispered. I have called private security. Real security. Not the sheriff. I checked the time. It was 6 p.m. The sun was dipping below the canyon walls, casting long, bruised shadows across the valley. The air was cooling rapidly, but the tension was rising. Private security? I asked. You mean mercenaries? I mean professionals who know how to deal with trash, she said, regaining a sliver of her arrogance. From the direction of the highway, 2 black SUVs with tinted windows turned onto the shoulder. They didn't look like police. They didn't look like county officials. They looked like trouble. 4 men stepped out. They were big, wearing tactical vests over black t-shirts, with no badges, no names, just muscle and intimidation. They walked toward the gate with the casual menace of men who enjoyed hurting people. Corinna smiled. It was a reptile's smile. Last chance, she said. Leave now, and maybe you can walk away with your legs intact. I looked at the approaching men. I looked at the bolt cutters on the ground. And then I looked at the setting sun. I realized that the time for talking was over. Corinna had escalated this from a legal dispute to a physical threat. She thought violence was the answer. She didn't know she was threatening a man who had nothing left to lose but the ground he stood on. You made a mistake, Corinna, I said quietly. You brought muscle to a machinery fight. I walked back to my truck, not to flee, but to prepare. As the first thug reached for the gate latch, I grabbed the radio mic from my dashboard. It was time for Phase 2. The sun was down, the gloves were off, and the real war for Obsidian Ridge was just beginning. Base, this is Unit 1, I said into the radio, my voice calm despite the adrenaline spiking in my blood. I have a code black at the gate. Hostile containment. 4 bogies armed, no badges. Initiate Phase 3 immediately. I repeat, bring the thunder. The radio crackled with static. Then a clear, deep voice responded. Copy that, Unit 1. The cavalry is rolling. ETA 6 hours. Hold the line. I dropped the mic and locked the doors of the Bronco just as the first mercenary reached my window. He was a slab of muscle with a shaved head and a tactical vest that strained against his chest. He didn't knock. He slammed the butt of a heavy flashlight against the glass. The impact shuddered through the frame of the truck, sending a spider web of cracks shooting across the driver's tinted window. Out of the vehicle, the man shouted, his voice muffled by the safety glass. Now! I didn't move. I didn't reach for a weapon. I simply raised my phone, the camera lens steady, the red recording light blinking like a calm, unblinking eye. You are assaulting a federal contractor inside a secured asset zone, I said, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. That is 5 years in federal prison, mandatory minimum. If you break that glass, you add destruction of evidence to the charge. Do you want to roll those dice for a paycheck from an HOA president? The man hesitated. He saw the camera. He saw the red wax seal on the documents still sitting on the dashboard. He was a hired thug, likely off-duty police or dishonorably discharged military, and he knew the difference between a civil dispute and a federal felony. He lowered the flashlight, his eyes narrowing. He turned to look at Corinna, who was standing by the gatehouse, her arms crossed, a smug look of victory plastered on her face. "He's locked in, Ms. Draxler," the man yelled. "We can't drag him out without breaching the vehicle." "Then breach it!" Corinna shrieked, her patience fraying. "I am paying you to remove trash, not to have a staring contest with it." The mercenary looked back at me, then at the shattered spiderweb on the glass. He made a calculation. He tapped the glass with his knuckles, a mockingly gentle sound. "You have to come out to pee eventually, pal," he sneered. "We'll be right here." He signaled to his team. They fanned out, surrounding the truck. One leaned against my tailgate. Another stood by the front bumper. They were enforcing a siege. They weren't going to drag me out. They were going to starve me out. Corinna walked up to the window, careful to stay behind the wall of muscle. She leaned in, her face distorted by the cracked glass. "You see," she mouthed, her voice barely audible. "You have nothing. No road, no power, no friends. Just a rusty truck and a long, cold night." She turned on her heel and walked back toward the gatehouse, the clicking of her heels fading into the growing darkness. The mercenaries settled in, lighting cigarettes, their laughter sharp and cruel in the desert silence. I sat back in the seat and killed the engine to save fuel. The cab grew quiet, save for the ticking of the cooling metal. I wasn't trapped. I was exactly where I needed to be. They thought this was a siege. They didn't realize it was a distraction. While they were watching my doors, they weren't watching the horizon. I checked my watch. 7 p.m. The temperature was dropping fast. The high desert didn't forgive the unprepared, but I had a thermal sleeping bag behind the seat and a thermos of coffee. I was comfortable. I watched the lights of Obsidian Ridge flicker on in the distance. It looked like a castle on a hill, a fortress of wealth built on stolen land. They were probably having dinner now, discussing the crazy man at the gate, laughing about how Corinna had handled the situation. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. Literally. I spent the next few hours reviewing the drone footage on my laptop. The screen dimmed to avoid attracting attention. The thermal map was damning. The unauthorized utility lines ran straight down the center of Unit 49B. They were buried shallow, likely to save money on excavation costs 10 years ago. It was lazy, it was greedy, and it was illegal. Every foot of that cable was a violation of the Mineral Leasing Act of 1920. Corinna hadn't just allowed it. The bank records I had pulled earlier showed she had facilitated it through a shell company, charging the telecom providers a right-of-way leasing fee that never made it into the HOA coffers. She was double-dipping, stealing from the government and stealing from her own neighbors. The sheer audacity of it was impressive, in a sociopathic sort of way. At midnight, the temperature hit 40 degrees. The mercenaries were shivering in their tactical vests. They were pacing, stomping their boots to keep warm. I poured myself a cup of hot coffee, making sure they saw the steam rising in the moonlight. One of them glared at me, muttering something that looked like a curse. I toasted him with the cup. They were losing focus. They were tired, cold, and bored. Perfect. I checked the GPS tracker on my phone. A blip was moving steadily along the interstate, closing in on the exit ramp 3 miles away. The cavalry wasn't just coming, it was bringing the heavy artillery. I closed my eyes for a moment, visualizing the map of the road, memorizing the coordinates of the water main. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to destroy homes, but sometimes you have to break a bone to reset it properly. The road had to go. It was the symbol of their arrogance and the physical evidence of their crime. 2 a.m. The silence was absolute. The desert predators, coyotes, owls, were hunting in the dark. The human predators outside my truck were dozing in their SUVs, engines idling to run the heaters. Corinna had gone home hours ago, confident that I would be gone or broken by morning. She underestimated the patience of a man who had spent 3 days waiting in a swamp to serve a subpoena to a bankrupt oil tycoon. This was a vacation compared to that. I sat up and stretched, my joints popping. It was time. I reached for the radio mic again. "Unit 1 to Bravo Team," I whispered. "Status? Bravo Team is at the staging area," the voice returned, crisp and ready. "Assets are offloaded. We are green for approach. Distance 1 mile. Lights out." "Copy," I said. "Commence Operation Clean Sweep. Watch for the water main at marker 03. "Understood. See you in the funny papers, boss." I put the radio down and looked out the windshield. The moon had set. The darkness was thick, heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of darkness that hid monsters. But tonight, the monster wasn't hiding in the dark. It was driving a 60-ton piece of yellow steel. If you are still here, deep in the trench with me, waiting for the ground to shake, comment the word "dozer" below right now. Let me know you are standing on the right side of the barricade when the lights go on. At 2:55 a.m., the ground began to tremble. It wasn't a sound at first, it was a vibration. The coffee in my cup rippled. The loose change in the console rattled. Outside, the mercenaries stirred. The one in the driver's seat of the lead SUV sat up, looking around confused. He opened his door and stepped out, listening. Then came the sound. It started as a low, guttural growl, like a thunderstorm trapped in a canyon. It grew louder, deeper, a mechanical roar that vibrated in the chest. Thrum, 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 thrum. The sound of massive diesel engines under load. The mercenary shouted something to his partner, pointing toward the highway. They drew their weapons, batons and tasers, uncertain of what was coming. They expected a truck, maybe a convoy. They didn't expect the apocalypse. At 3 a.m. sharp, the darkness was shattered. 4 banks of high-intensity LED floodlights snapped on simultaneously, blindingly white, cutting through the night like lasers. The mercenaries threw their hands up to shield their eyes, stumbling back. From the wall of light emerged the silhouette of a leviathan. A Caterpillar D9 bulldozer, its blade gleamed like the teeth of a shark, crested the small rise leading to the gate. It was massive, a house on tracks, pushing a wave of air and noise ahead of it. Behind it, a second machine, an excavator with a hydraulic breaker, clanked into view. The ground shook violently now. The D9 didn't slow down. It rolled toward the gatehouse, its engine roaring a challenge that drowned out the shouts of the security team. I opened my door and stepped out. The mercenaries were too distracted to stop me. They were backing away, terrified. You don't argue with 60 tons of steel. The D9 stopped 10 yards from my truck, its engine idling with a menacing chug, chug, chug. The operator, a man named Mike who had been moving earth since before Corinna was born, leaned out of the cab and gave me a thumbs up. I nodded. I walked to the center of the road, illuminated by the floodlights, casting a long shadow toward the Obsidian Ridge gate. I raised my hand. The mercenaries froze. The tow truck driver, who had been sleeping in his cab, woke up and scrambled out, his eyes wide as saucers. "What is this?" the lead mercenary screamed over the noise. "You can't bring this here." "I'm not bringing it here," I yelled back. "It's already here, and it has work to do." I pointed to the asphalt. "Mike," I shouted into my radio, "clear the overburden, Zone 1. Let's find that ore." The D9 roared. Black smoke poured from its vertical stack. The massive steel tracks bit into the pavement, sparking as they turned. Mike dropped the blade. Crunch. The sound was sickening and satisfying all at once. The steel edge caught the lip of the pristine asphalt drive and peeled it back like the skin of an orange. 10 years of luxury, of exclusivity, of private property crumbled in seconds. The asphalt shattered into chunks, revealing the packed earth beneath. The D9 pushed forward, relentless. It wasn't just scraping the road, it was erasing it. It rolled past my truck, heading straight for the gatehouse. The mercenaries ran. They abandoned their post, abandoned their orders, and sprinted for the safety of the desert scrub. They weren't paid enough to die under a bulldozer. The noise woke the dead, and it certainly woke Obsidian Ridge. Lights flipped on in the mansions on the hill. People came out onto their balconies in bathrobes. And then headlights appeared. A white Mercedes sped down the hill, swerving erratically. It screeched to a halt 50 yards from the destruction. Corinna stumbled out. She wasn't wearing her suit this time. She was in a silk robe, her hair in a net, her face a mask of sheer terror. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice thin and useless against the roar of the diesel engines. "Stop it! You're destroying my road!" She ran toward the bulldozer, waving her arms. "Mike, hold!" I ordered. The D9 stopped, its blade resting on a pile of broken asphalt. Corinna reached me, breathless, her eyes wild. "Are you insane?" she shrieked. "I will have you executed. This is domestic terrorism." "This is mining," I said, my voice cold. "I am removing the surface obstruction to access my mineral rights." "You were warned, Corinna. You had 12 hours to negotiate. You chose to send thugs." "You can't do this," she wailed. "There are people sleeping." "Not anymore," I said. "And we are just getting started. Mike, hit the subgrade." The bulldozer lurched forward again. Corinna gasped and scrambled back. The blade dug deeper this time, cutting into the dirt beneath the road base. And then it happened. The accident I had anticipated. The blade snagged something solid. There was a metallic groan, followed by a high-pitched hiss. A geyser of water erupted from the trench. It wasn't a trickle. It was a pressurized blast from a 12-inch main. A wall of mud and water shot 30 feet into the air, arcing perfectly over the D9, and coming down directly on top of Corinna. "Holy cow!" Mike yelled over the radio, sounding entirely unsurprised. Corinna stood frozen as the deluge hit her. The force of the water knocked her to her knees. Her silk robe was instantly soaked, heavy with red clay mud. She sputtered, wiping slime from her eyes, looking like a swamp creature rising from the deep. The water pressure began to carve a massive crater in the road, washing away the dirt and revealing the secrets hidden beneath. The black casing of the fiber optic cables floated to the surface. The thick gray conduit of the high-voltage lines lay exposed, hissing as the water hit the warm casing. "Oh, look at that," I said, walking to the edge of the new river. "Unauthorized utilities, buried without a protective casing. That is a code violation, Corinna. A big one." Corinna coughed up mud, trying to stand. She slipped and fell back into the muck. "My suit," she whimpered, delirious. "My road." The residents of Obsidian Ridge were gathering now. They stood on the other side of the washout, separated from us by a growing moat of muddy water. They were silent. They stared at the D9. They stared at the ruined road. And they stared at their president, wallowing in the mud. They didn't look angry at me. They looked horrified at the truth. They saw the cables. They saw the shoddy infrastructure that had been hidden under the pretty asphalt. The illusion of perfection was broken. The sun began to crest over the canyon walls, painting the scene in harsh morning light. The destruction was total. A trench, 10 feet wide and 4 feet deep, severed Obsidian Ridge from the outside world. The water had been shut off at the main valve by my team, but the damage was done. The D9 sat atop a mountain of rubble like a conqueror. Corinna was sitting on a rock, wrapped in a blanket someone had thrown to her, shivering, her spirit broken. But I wasn't done. The sound of sirens approached from the highway. Not the lazy wail of the sheriff's cruiser this time. This was a convoy. Blue and red strobe lights flashed in the dawn. 4 black SUVs with government plates pulled up behind my truck. Corinna looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "The FBI," she whispered. "Finally, arrest him. He destroyed everything." She staggered to her feet, pointing a muddy finger at me. "Officer! Agent! That man is a maniac! He blew up the water main." A tall man in a windbreaker with FBI, printed in bold yellow letters on the back, stepped out of the lead vehicle. He didn't look at me. He walked straight past the bulldozer, straight past the rubble, and stopped in front of Corinna. "Corinna Draxler?" he asked. "Yes," she cried. "I am the victim here. Take him away." The agent pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Ma'am, I am Special Agent Miller with the Financial Crimes Division. I have a warrant for your arrest." Corinna froze. "What?" "Wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion," Miller recited, his voice flat. "We have been tracking the shell accounts of Vanguard Consulting for 6 months. We just needed physical confirmation of the illegal utility leasing scheme. Thank you for digging it up for us." He nodded toward the exposed cables in the trench. "That is the smoking gun, ma'am. Or rather, the smoking wire." Corinna's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "But the road..." "Mr. Vance is acting within his rights as the owner of the mineral estate," Miller said. "He sent us the tip, and the bank records. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the valley. It echoed off the canyon walls. a final punctuation mark to Corinna's reign of terror. As the agent led her away, her muddy feet dragging on the pavement, she looked back at me one last time. There was no anger left, only shock. She had played the game of kings and queens, thinking she owned the board. She never realized she was just a pawn standing on a trap door. The residents stood on the other side of the trench, watching their leader being stuffed into the back of a federal vehicle. They looked lost. The road was gone, the water off. They were stranded on an island of luxury with no bridge. Dr. Henderson stepped forward to the edge of the trench. "Mr. Vance," he shouted. "She is gone, but we are still stuck. What happens now?" I looked at the crowd. I wasn't a monster. I just wanted what was mine. "I have a proposal," I shouted across the gap. "My company can have a temporary steel bridge installed in 4 hours and repave this road to federal safety standards within 3 days. A murmur went through the crowd. "For how much?" a woman asked warily. "The HOA is dissolved," I said. "I am offering a direct lease to a new elected resident board." "How much?" Henderson asked, bracing himself. $1 a year, I said, with conditions. I raised 3 fingers. 1. The new board must be transparent. 2. No aesthetic tyranny. Treat people like neighbors, not inmates. 3. You never put a sticker on a vehicle again. Henderson looked at his neighbors, seeing the relief washing over their faces. He smiled. "Exactly right. We have a deal, Mr. Vance. Mike, bring in the bridge layer." My crew worked efficiently, dropping a Bailey bridge over the trench. By noon, traffic was moving. By evening, the utilities were patched. It felt less like a conquest and more like a liberation. The fear Corinna had cultivated evaporated. As the sun set, I packed my gear. I threw the sledgehammer into the bed. I didn't need the asset seized sign anymore. The trench spoke for itself. Dr. Henderson walked up to my window. "We need a treasurer for the new board. Someone not afraid to dig up the truth." I laughed. "I've had enough of HOAs, Doc. Besides, I have a golf course in Nevada to inspect, built on a federal grazing easement." Henderson chuckled. "Give 'em hell, Stryker." I shifted the Ford into gear. It rumbled to life. I drove across the clanking steel bridge, passing the empty gatehouse and the spot where Corinna had fallen. I didn't look back. The wind rushed through the broken window, smelling of victory. I had inherited dirt and a headache, but I was leaving with a restored reputation and a community freed from a tyrant. Corinna learned the hard way. Never build your castle on someone else's dirt, and never underestimate a man with a rusty truck. If you enjoyed seeing justice served with 60 tons of steel, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of heavy metal revenge. Thanks for riding shotgun.
Thanks for staying to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to IS Stories.